Hello and welcome to a new episode of Everstage's Go to Masters podcast. We converse with RevOps and GTM leaders from some of the most successful companies today and learn from their unique stories. Joining us today is Sam Wegman, VP of Customer Experience and Commercial Operations. Sam, thanks for joining us. Could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, Venka, it's great to join you this morning. Yeah, I work for you mentioned my title. I work for Univar Solutions. We are a global chemical and ingredient distributor. What that means is we move chemicals and repackage chemicals and have inventories all over the world to service a variety of industries. I'm specifically on our chemical distribution side, which is more on the commodity side of the business, which will play into some of the conversation we have later today. But yeah, I think a lot of times people will say, "What does Univar really do?" And I think the best way I describe it oftentimes, it's more than this, but it's like if you think about how Amazon moves product from warehouse from point A to point B for a B2B company, that's what we do for our customers. We have chemical and ingredient inventories all over the world, but tremendous value chains that we offer, not just the logistics of it all, but fundamentally that's what we do. We move product from point A to point B.
Exciting to have you here, Sam. This is going to be, like we discussed a little bit before the podcast started, going to be super interesting for us to discuss this particular aspect of it. So, in chemical distribution, where do you see the biggest tension between CX and service expectations and margin protection?
Yeah, it's a great question, especially with me leading the customer experience strategy for the organization, because obviously we want to satisfy our customers at all costs. And I think from our business background, we work in a commodity for where I am, a commodity driven environment, which means there's always going to be friction with speed and discipline. Our customers expect quick turnaround on everything, whether it's a price, whether it's a service question. We do hundreds of thousands of transactions a year, and so speed matters. But also, you've got to have that tension around discipline and margin. And so when we think about that friction that we have around our CX versus kind of margin, we have to think about and make sure we have the right governance in place, the right approval workflows, things people guardrails that, make people uncomfortable at times when you're trying to solve customer experience, but at the same time, we want to manage margin expectations for the company. And what happens in supply chain, and I think all of us are aware what happened back in 2020, 2021 with COVID and the supply chain disruption. Your input costs can change, your supply constraints can change. There's a lot of competitive pressure. So we have to balance those two things in order to, one, respond quickly to customers. So that gets back to the value of our company is like we have to be able to educate customers on the supply chain disruption, why it's impacting maybe a slow response rate. So it's a constant balance, but also you get those calls from customers that just want to place an order today, want a price today, and our sellers are really super energized to go take those orders. So it's just about balance.
So, if you had to pick a good enough metric to pay on, what wins? Gross profit, dollars, margin bands, hybrid gates, and why is it
Yeah.
practical for the field?
Yeah. Also a really good question because I think, I've been in this business over 30 some years. I didn't mention that earlier, but I've been doing this a long time. And I think, at the end of the day, whether you are a privately held company, publicly traded company, it always gets back to the business needs to grow EBITDA. And so when we think about that, for us, it's always been around margin, right? Gross profit, gross margin, depending upon the company and how they calculate it. But, it's really, we've tried things in the past where we said, hey, what about a balance of volume? Because I mentioned earlier in our supply chain, we have warehouses all over the world. We have a lot of fixed costs. So we again have to balance that, but we've never gone to revenue because of the volatility in the market of things we can't control. What we can control is how we manage our costs and how we manage kind of those margin expectations with sellers. So for us, it's always been around margin. And I can give you a quick case study in the industry. This goes back several years ago, and we'll talk about it maybe later too. But we've tried doing things where we've done segmentation and volume only, and I think the behaviors what you end up getting is what you've put in front of them, and that often doesn't lead to the best outcomes, not only for the salesperson but also for the company.
Yeah, I think margin also kind of ties together all of the other factors also a little bit, right? It doesn't like leave everything out on the table. When you take margin, it is a function of a lot of those parameters as well
That's
at
right.
some level.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And what's the minimum visibility reps and managers need to not call a margin based comp like a black box, right? Because very quickly compensation becomes a black box, and like, oh, what do you uh, do with that?
I think black box, I think about, how do we explain kind of the strategy that we're trying to evolve with margin. So one, it starts with what is our annual operating plan? What are we trying to achieve? And kind of connecting any kind of incentive plan that we want to put in front of our reps to that plan. And then it gets down to, it needs to be simple math. We don't need to have them to do calculus to understand how their incentive plan is going to work. So, and we've done that. Like I've lived through it as a seller, as a sales manager, and it got to points in my past years when I was doing that work that I didn't even understand the plan. But I understand that we needed to grow our business. And at the end of the day, just get up, go grow the business. Whatever compensation plan, I can't figure it out. If I can't explain it in 30 seconds, um, I'll just get paid because I'm growing my business. And so that was always my mentality. That doesn't always work well with everybody because they want to know very clearly. They're very motivated when I do X, Y comes. So we try to keep it simple. And we try to make sure that it's tied right back to our value creation plan from the beginning and that we're transparent as to why we need that. So less levers that we pull, less complexity in the plan is really what we try to go for.
Interesting. Some of this is true, I think, globally for any sales team, right? The simplest plan is always the most efficient plan because people can quickly take motivation out of mental math rather than having a calculator on the side. So interesting that certain things don't change. So maybe just leading on from here, what plans aim for pricing discipline and what works better in practice, especially when you talk about margins and all that?
Yeah, well, I think we've done a really good job in our company of creating engines and process governance and guardrails and best in class tools that we give our sellers to be able to go out and manage price and things like that to try to maximize where we can our margin, right, through pricing. But too much of a good thing around guardrails and those types of things and process can slow us down. And that goes back to the very first, one of the questions around customer experience. It's like, so if you have too much of that, then it takes too long to get back to the customer, and you can, in the commodity world, you can lose it. So, what we do, we have a couple different processes that work really well for us. One, we've inserted local decision makers, so we're a global company. So even though we know we buy millions and billions of pounds of product that we kind of manage centrally in terms of the costs that we pay, we then engage local extension team members around that supply situation into our districts and businesses. And they understand the market, they understand the speed. They're given kind of, they're given margin, floors and they can make quicker approvals, like kind of in the business. We've also recently experimented with on demand in a world where if we give them the information up front and trust our sellers and more of trust and verify, for certain product lines, not all product lines, but ones that move at such a high velocity that are so highly competitive. Is there a way? And we heard that feedback from our sellers that we potentially could be losing market share because we're taking too long to get our approvals and guardrails in place. So trust and verify is more of a we'll be more transparent. Back to the other question, we'll be more transparent with you. Take the order when you can, and then we'll work it on the backside either later that day or the next day to say, hey. And so far, that's proved out really well that could work too. So it's a kind of again, it's all about balance. You can't do trust and verify with everything, and you can't have guardrails that slow down the process such that we lose business.
Interesting. So the regional thing is very interesting. So it gives you the flexibility to take decisions faster and not get bogged down by a lot of decision making.
Yeah, that's right. Because the
Speed.
markets are the
Yeah.
markets, and the market and products can be different in different markets. You could have a different industry. I'm in the States right now, but you could in Philadelphia market could be very different than the California market, could be very different from the UK market, or if we're going down into Mexico or Canada. So the markets bear the industry in that particular market can vary. So while we have centralized guidance and centralized guardrails around what we think the market is in general, the truth really is where the transactions are happening. So um, that regional input is critical, and it speeds up our process for us.
And I guess margin floors are also set with conversations between stakeholders, and it is set with good thought and place. So awesome. Uh, how do you, through compensation plans, how do you push for better mix? right? Again, going back to the
Yeah.
complexity that we just discussed. So, how do you keep things simple but still push better makes in your
Yeah, it all kind of ties together, doesn't it, Venkat? Because you're right. If you have a simplistic plan and you have the right guardrails in place and you're transparent and you are tied to your value creation plan, everything should work well. So we've done a lot of improvement on that in the last couple of years. And I think when you think about supply chain in our business and profitability, and you think, okay, well, there's been, I mentioned there might be a case study I could share. I call it a case study because what doesn't work, that I've seen not work, is in our business, if you just try to incent behavior around certain products. Because what sales reps will do is it's very simple to understand. You sell these products, you earn X. You sell these products, you don't earn anything, but you can still sell them. And this was going back, and it's probably been 20 years when this was done. And exactly what we incentivized them to do happened. Now, the good news is the products that they wanted to grow grew. The bad news is the stuff that we still needed to sell for throughput to keep our fixed cost right. So our EBITDA bottom line was fine. Those products went away because they weren't being incentivized. So it was like on 1 year, you made the most money on those products that you've ever made, and we sold every pound we could sell, but then we lost a lot of volume on the stable business that it was more commoditized at the time. So that was a good lesson in what not to do. What we do today is we look at again, back to our value creation plan and our strategy, and we know what is the value that Univar brings, because at the end of the day, chemical manufacturers all over the world make the molecule. We don't make the molecule. And what we do is we could buy it in a tank truck, we could buy it in a rail car, we could buy it in an ocean vessel. And we purchase that. And then we break it down into smaller packages, whether we deliver it in a bulk truck, a mini bulk truck, a drum or a tote. That's the value that we provide. So knowing that that's the value that we provide, because a lot of times customers could just buy direct in large volumes. So we think about, the working capital component to them. But again, we also think from a sales incentive, when we repackage things, we're really good at it and it's more profitable for us. So that's one segment. It's still simplified plan, but hey, when you hit your goal, every pound of package could be worth X, and every pound of bulk is still worth something, but maybe just at a less variable rate. And so it's really clear we need both, but it's got to, again, I keep using the word balance. It's got to be balanced. So we just try to keep it all tied into what value we bring to customers, how that creates value for the company, shareholders if they exist, and then ultimately we want our sellers to be successful.
Yeah, yeah, and you casually throw across how over the years of experience you've managed to figure out the commission plans that work. But I mean, it keeps. I mean, I hate cliches, but the simplest things are the hardest to solve, right? Like you can't really make things simple unless you have done it so many times in different ways, and then you
Yeah,
arrive at the
it's
simplest,
amazing.
most elegant things.
Yeah, it's
Which is
amazing
so
when you
nice.
reflect back what you've learned over the years, because in the moment it feels like, wow, that was bad. But you can always draw upon those experiences, right? And say, wow, let's not make that mistake again.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so it goes, and they're not easy to construct because like you said, sometimes you take a chance and we think this is the right call. But last year we made that modification when we looked at where, how we sell product, whether it's through a package or whether it's through like a bulk, like a direct type sale. And we said they're both valuable. One's just a little more valuable in terms of the value we bring back to our customers.
yeah. And from Salesforce point of view, what coaching motion makes margin based plans actually change behavior? Like what kind of reviews, discount coaching, targeting do you advocate?
Yeah, I would say we've spent a lot of time in this area because at the end of the day, the translation of everything we've talked about from top to bottom has to be in sync. And so we've put a lot of emphasis on our frontline sales leaders to understand the rationale for everything that we're doing. But then that translates down to even a more tactical weekly one-on-one session with that sales rep. So how is your pipeline? How's it growing? What are the things that are blocking you from being successful? Some of the stuff we talked about. Are you getting responsiveness internally to take some of that business? So it's we call them our sales playbooks. And we have a kind of a play sheet for the sales rep, and we have a play sheet for the manager. Again, these are all tied to whatever that annual operating plan looks like, value capture plan. So each year those could be tweaked, but at the end of the day, everybody can sell in a different fashion, we're not going to try to restrict that. but these are the real core elements that we'll coach you on each week so that we can all be in sync and hit those goals.
Interesting. And maybe something that's close to my heart. I'm a bit of a nerd. So I understand some of these things require a lot of, system data depth within your tech stack, right? So you have led in your past SAP transformations and stuff. So what are the system data prerequisites, if I may ask, to make this run and work properly?
Yeah, I think for us, I mean, data is so critically important. And I think it's one of our advantages, if I'm frank, because we have gone to SAP as a chemical distributor, being on one system that's a global, because a lot of times these companies like Univar was built through acquisitions and bolt-ons, and so is our competition. So, as I've also worked in my back past for a fairly small regional distributor, and they have their own system, but it's all like one location. So they can be nimble and fast. And so when we try to scale that globally, SAP's really it's been helpful and it's been a hindrance at times because if the data is not accurate, garbage in, garbage out, and then when that flows through the business and it flows through to a seller and it throws through to compensation, it can be challenging. So making sure you have the right hierarchies and products set up properly. As a company, we have multiple selling channels and expertise, and so we can share customers. So getting that master data right, like who's customer, who's the lead on this customer? Does this product get sold by the left side or the right side? Is super important. So if our master data doesn't reflect it properly, then what ends up happening is the credit's going somewhere else, and then we have to work through the back office and say, okay, we gotta correct those things. So product hierarchy, making sure we have the customer segmented in the right business and the right seller, things like that are super critical because then we also use that data flow from SAP into tools, like Everstage. And so there needs to be consistency in what our sellers see in our data reporting versus what we show over here. And when that doesn't happen, oftentimes it's because we've built in rules behind the scenes and they don't necessarily see all that. But, more often than not, we find that the root cause is not necessarily the tool they're seeing their data in. It's the master data behind the scenes and how it's routing. So it's important.
So maybe to sum up, what would be the cleanest design for you in terms of region segment, product family, and like what would be your three success signals that you would watch for
In terms of the data or just overall success?
overall success? I guess.
Overall success, yeah. I think, yeah, this one I think a lot about this question and I'm like, well, if I had to really redesign, it's like I think doing things at a region level, we talked earlier about the markets. And not only the markets can be different, the cultures can be very different. I lead CX. And when we do NPS scores, as an example, a score of 10 out of 10 means something different in the US than it does to say someone in LATAM and really, frankly, EMEA. And then you learn culturally in EMEA that as a student, you score a 7 or 8 out of 10, you're considered doing really well, that 10s aren't really often given. So then when we try to do global initiatives like NPS and our scores are 20 points lower in EMEA than they are in the US, and people think there's a problem in EMEA. And I'm like, no, actually they're scoring really well. So
Yes.
those you have to like think about any type of plan you're doing about the cultural differences because how customers react not only to pricing, industries, relationships that we build. Some people in certain cultures want to just transact via email. So it's all those channels, it's all those things. So getting it down to, first to the region, understanding the markets that you're playing in, and then maybe the cultural differences that can drive kind of the success, I think are the three things that come to mind for me.
Awesome. You're bringing back memories of my school. But yeah.
Yeah. It's fun though. I think that's the beauty of it all is having all that diversity and having all that ability. I think if you just think through it all and the impacts it can have, it's real. It's a real thing. And I think that's just something that I keep front of mind all the time.
Yeah, I'm going to put you on a spot a little bit, but you know, if you want to, give one takeaway, one distributors to remember going into 2026, what would that be?
Well, we're hoping for a little more stability. I think it's been a really chaotic couple of years in supply chain. I mean, I think most people at least on the commodity side, would say we're a supply chain type company. So I think we're really looking forward to potentially, we had the whole COVID run and then it's kind of the demand has fallen off in our business because oversupply, some of the things that are happening in the markets, tariffs certainly play a role in everything that we do around because we do import and export product too. So I think the message for us is we're optimistic, but also cautiously optimistic that we like to think, the markets have come down. Are we at the bottom of the market? And, no one knows that answer. If I did, I wouldn't be probably doing what I do. But I think we're going to continue to operate in whatever the environment is in chemical distribution. And I think if you just stay the course, have the discipline, have the plan, have the focus, that's what we can control. We can't control what's happening in the market. So I think my one takeaway for everyone is like, think about your business, the situation you're in, and make sure that you have everything kind of buttoned up in order to give it your best shot. Like your operating plans might be ambitious given the market, but at least do the same behaviors, do the same actions, have the same governance around it, because when the market turns, you've got that work done.
Well, that brings us to the end of this delightful session of Go to Masters. A big thank you to Sam for sharing her experiences and valuable insights with us. Remember, you can tune into this every week to learn more from game changers driving hyper-growth companies across the globe. Go to Masters is brought to you by Everstage, your trusted partner for transforming the way businesses handle sales compensation. I'm your host Venkat, signing off.